Hello everyone, it is I, Watercolour. On this second advent, I have decided to paint a pair of boots. Not just any boots though. Oh no, these boots are special, very special. They are based on an old tradition around this time of year that I, as a German kid, used to celebrate rather frequently. This tradition goes as follows. On the evening of the 5th of December, we were brought together and out of a special box we got some brushes and shoe polish. Yep, we had to clean and polish our shoes. Or rather, only one pair, the winter boots. This was not just for the sake of cleaning though. Of course there was a reward waiting for us kids in the end. As the story goes, once your shoes are cleaned well enough and you've placed them outside, St. Nikolaus will come by during the night and fill them with treats. That is, if you've been a good kid. These did not have to be sweets necessarily. Traditionally, you would receive nuts, tangerines, oranges, and apples, among other things. Over the years, though, more and more sweet things were introduced by also my parents. So I decided to paint one boot that was full of the traditional Nikolaus treats, that being, the oranges / tangerines, the nuts and apples, and the other boot would be filled with some of my favourite Christmas sweets from Germany. For example, I put in a candy cane. Okay, that is not necessarily one of my favourites, and it's not a German Christmas sweet, but I did have it at least once during the Christmas time. Maybe not for Nikolaus, but I did have it once. Anyway, the other sweets were things that partially also featured in my fairy Christmas tree video last week. We have Lebkuchenherzen and cinnamon stars, but also something we call Marzipankartoffeln, or marzipan potatoes, if you were to directly translate the word one-to-one. Don't worry, these are not potatoes coated in marzipan. That would be a sin, I think. But it's simply marzipan rolled into little bite-sized balls, and I do like them, especially if the marzipan is good. They're delicious. Then we also have some Dominosteine, which are the little chocolate squares. Don't ask me why more like cubes, and not rectangular like your regular domino brick. I don't know. Things happened. And lastly, I've also but there's also a biscuit with sprinkles, and I forgot the name of it, but I remember that those biscuits were very common in my Nikolaus treats and gifts, so I put one in there just as a little nod to my childhood memories. And lastly, I decided to place a Stutenkerl into the boot. A Stutenkerl is a sort of sweet dough-shaped guy that's, roughly shaped to resemble a person. As good as you can, depends on the skill of the baker. It has raisins for eyes, and he's usually holding a plastic pipe in one hand, or I guess arm. It's kind of like the arm is kind of folded over the pipe to show that it's kind of holding on to it, and that's how it's baked. Those little dough men were quite a staple in my childhood. I remember we used to be given one at school around Nikolaus, at least in my younger years. It's a bit of a blurry memory, but it was there. And I do love them. They're delicious. Okay, so perhaps some of you might have had the thought, well, isn't St. Nikolaus also Santa Claus, aka the guy who brings presents on Christmas Day for all you English-speaking people? To that I have to say you are right. St. Nikolaus is the guy who eventually, through modern legends and such, became Santa Claus. I mean, it's kind of Nikolaus, Claus, we just kind of shortened up the name a bit. Even the boots and treats tradition carried over for some of the English-speaking folk in the form of the Christmas stocking, a large sock that you guys fill with sweets and maybe other gifts. You don't clean your shoes and put them outside, you get extra socks for those. Well, it depends on the parents, I would say. To the people in Germany, though, while we do have a Santa Claus called Weihnachtsmann, who is identical to the one literally everyone pictures in their heads upon the mention of the name Santa Claus, we also have Saint Nikolaus that looks more like what he would have as the bishop he was. So basically, it's the same guy, just dressed a bit differently. This saint was incredibly kind and generous, according to the stories that I heard during my, younger years. He was helping out the poor by giving them food and whatever else they might need in their lives. like he did for 3 young ladies, where he gave them dowries so that they could marry and not turn to unholy things. Let's keep it at that for this video. So he was all in all a very nice and generous man. It is in his honor and remembering these gifts and helping others that in Germany we still put out our boots to be filled by him, even though he is long dead and his skeleton is in 2 different places because people can't leave the dead alone if they're saints. Guys, what is wrong with you? He is, by the way, not celebrated on his death or birthday, but instead on his name day, the 6th of December. Though, as mentioned, boots are cleaned on the day beforehand for us German kiddos who do it like that, at least in my area. Traditions do vary across the whole of Germany, and there are some traditions, I think, in the Netherlands as well, but I'm not entirely sure how those go, because I'm not a Dutch kid. Saint Nikolaus also has a sort of assistant that we, in my area where I came from, the Ruhrgebiet in Germany, call Knecht Ruprecht. He is responsible for all those kids that were naughty that year, because, as you know, good list and bad list, same thing for Santa Claus, except Santa Claus is not the one punishing the kiddos, it's Knecht Ruprecht. He would punish them with hits from his rod if they were on St. Nikolaus's naughty list. At least that is the story I grew up with. There are, of course, variations, depending on the region you are in and whatever tradition you might be celebrating. It's very varied. There's so many more stories that relate to Knecht Ruprecht that all differ to my childhood stories that I've been told. So, for all of you interested in learning more about him and all the different ways he is represented and seen and viewed, I have left a Wikipedia article down below that goes into more detail about all the different versions that exist of him. I was merely telling you about the version that I grew up with. The painting I am making is more of a memory of these celebrations for myself, a time I look fondly back to, but I do not in fact celebrate St. Nikolaus Day anymore. As sad as that may be, we simply cannot eat so many sweets in December, no matter how many friends send us sweets. We wanted to do a less sweet-centered Christmas, but didn't quite work out. It doesn't really matter, the sweets are nice, it just doesn't work with our personal goals. But oh well, doesn't really matter. Nevertheless, I wanted to paint this as, by the time this video would come out, Nikolaus would have just been celebrated, so in my mind it fits very well that I drew these. I kind of painted the painting before Nikolaus Day, like 2 days before, and then this video is coming out on the Sunday afterwards. Fun times. Plus it gave me the opportunity to draw something non-human-like for once. This painting took me quite a while to complete, an entire day in fact, but it was so worth it. Technically the footage of the camera came up to 3 hours, but you're going to have to account for the drying time in between all of these little clips that are in my video. It was quite a bit longer. After my underpaintings, which took up a lot of layers of phthalo blue, phthalo green, carmine, light red, and permanent blue violet, as well as some mixes from the palette that were still on there from some previous painting that I can't remember what it was. When I added the actual true colours that the objects were supposed to have, everything just came together so nicely. I love underpainting. It has become one of my favourite things to do with watercolours. It's just, I love it. The red boot especially started looking so soft and snuggly once the red was added together with some darker shadows. I absolutely adore it. I mean, it's not quite there yet in the video, but when it gets there, you'll see what I mean. I tried to keep in mind that there were 2 candles behind these things, providing a light source in addition to whatever might be outside the boots. So, as I painted, though I forgot to account for this in the first layer, I tried to keep that in mind and just added a little bit more yellow, keep things lighter around the edges a bit because they're being lit from the back, I also make sure that the underpaintings in every area are not exactly the same colours. For example, I used a little bit more of a greenish underpainting on the red boot and some more red hues on things like the 2 fir branches on the right hand side and the holly leaves on the red boot. Though, as you may or may not have noticed in the sketch, the boot on the left has stars on it that, as I went into painting, didn't colour in at all because I just didn't remember that they were there and had to be painted in. Plus, in the end, I don't think that the boot colour would have matched the stars on it very well at all, so maybe it's for the best that I didn't paint them in at all. Anyways, as I am painting, I paint the shadows underneath everything in order to make it appear as though there was a floor, but I don't paint anything beyond the floor until the very, very end. And I think on the left-hand side the floor was a little bit too low, even after I tried to raise it up a bit, because the second boot, so like the boot on the left-hand side, kind of looks a little bit like it's just kind of floating there. Or maybe just standing on the nuts. That could also be something, I don't know. Anyways, I didn't paint the background until the end because I was unsure of what colour to use for it, because the rest of the painting was very colourful already, with the reds and greens and blues and browns, oranges, yellows, and the floor was sort of red, purple and blue. So I wasn't sure what colour to even use for the background that wouldn't immediately either clash with the rest of the painting or blend in with certain parts of the painting and all that. I decided that called for a little break and asking some people I knew for advice. In the end, someone told me to make it bonbon rosa. I guess you could call it candy pink or something like that, which I had already kind of thought of using my rose paint for this, so I just decided to go for it. And sometimes you just have to be a little brave and just do something. When you think that the artwork needs something in the background, just add something in the background and go with your gut. And it did work out for me. Well, kinda. I ended up leaning more into purple rather than pink, but it worked so well and I was so happy with it in the end. Even with the entirety of the rest of the painting already done, I barely had any issues with accidentally activating the paint that was already on the paper, which was a big relief for me at least. I made sure to keep a light border around the candle flames because the area around them would not be of a dark purple colour, obviously, because they're bright and shining light. Also, the brush I used, the little kind of sort of flat but kind of circled brush, I don't know, it kind of didn't work so smoothly, if you know what I mean. Perhaps I should have wet the entire area first instead of just going in with the big Da Vinci brush, but I don't know. Well, it looks okay for me in the end anyways. Overall, throughout the process of this painting, I was very, very pleased with myself for most of the process, even at the start when there was barely any paint on the paper and a lot of the features were indiscernible, especially the shoelaces. That kind of broke my brain a little bit trying to figure out where to place these shoelaces and make sure that the border between them, the shoelace bit behind it, what's it called? The tongue of a shoe? I'm not entirely sure. Shoe anatomy, I don't know. But it worked just fine, you know. But I have to admit, the nuts caused me some issues because they did blend into each other while I was doing the underpainting and some of the original sketch around that area, and then that was just kind of lost a little bit. Like, I had planned a walnut shell a little more to the front, but that never became a thing, just like the stars on the left boot never became a thing, which is sad because I kind of like the stars. It's okay though, so long as one can tell that there are nuts lying around the left boot, I'm okay and happy. I had considered adding metallic watercolours as well, but by the end of this painting it was the late evening and I was too tired to continue working on it any longer, which is a shame because in some areas I could have just added some metallic paints, but perhaps this is for the best. It looks fine just as it is without any shiny bits, and perhaps the shiny bits would have been too much. And with that, the painting was signed. I cleaned up the edges a little bit because I couldn't take the dark purple spot in the left corner. Perhaps I should have waited for the paint to dry, not just on the paper, but also on the tape before removing it. But, well, it was late and I still had to get the painting underneath my book so it could flatten before I scan it. Speaking of scanning in, the video is pretty much done now, so let's take a look at the final result together now. I am so immensely proud of this painting. Sure, there are areas of improvement for the boots and the Stutenkerl, but all in all, everything is simply and quite plainly cute. And edible looking. My sister has asked me as I was working on this if she may eat it. I told her no, and that goes for all of you too. My painting is to look at and not to eat. Repeat after me, everyone. Paintings are friends, not food. Thank you. In all seriousness though, it does look mouth-wateringly good. Just thinking about it gets me hungry for some of those sweet treats that I will never be able to reach because I am not in Germany, which is kind of sad. But either way, I love this painting. Everything about it, the colours, the composition, the look of everything. It gets me in the Christmas mood so much. Well, if you have enjoyed this second Christmas episode of mine, why not give it a like? Check out my socials, my Discord and Twitch down below, subscribe to the channel, and tell me down below if wherever you live, you have a similar tradition of that to our Saint Nikolaus, and otherwise, have a lovely second Advent. For the time being, I am the Witch of Paint, and I shall see you all next Sunday. Ho, ho, ho. Goodbye, everyone. Ho, ho, ho! What has gotten into my boot here? A viewer that has watched until the very end. I'm assuming you are here in my boot because you are looking for outtakes. Well, I have a few to give to you, so have fun. On the evening of the 5th of December, we were brought... Okay, let's try that again. This was all not just for the sake of cleaning though. As the story goes, once your shoes are cleaned and put outside. Oh, apparently I can't talk this morning. And it's got not ravens. It's got raisins. Ravens for eyes. Ooh, caw. To the people in Germany though, while we do have. Let's try it again.